Hey, welcome back to World Entertainment. And of course, now that the superhero genre seems to be dying out on the big screen and even the small screen at this stage, the question was, of course, what's Hollywood's next go-to franchise? Like, do they go back to westerns? Does it horror make a big, massive resurge? Even though horror does well anyway, because they're made for next to nothing and people seem to enjoy them. But one of the main things that the finger seemed to be pointed towards was, of course, video game adaptations. And with the likes of the Minecraft movie doing so well, like almost hitting $1 billion, it made sense that that was the direction they were going to go in. And that does seem to be the case. There does seem to be more and more video game adaptations. And now we have the latest one that seems to be getting a movie, but it's coming from a studio that you would never expect, because this ain't going to be a Warner Brothers or a Sony type of venture. This is going to be A24's video game adaptation. And that game that they're going to do is Death Stranding. So, Death Stranding, there's obviously 2 games of it now. They are pretty successful games. I know the first one at least got a mixed reaction from gamers in the fact that it wasn't exactly what they were expecting. You know, they kind of argued about the playability of it, the fact that you have to be this courier carrying this thing, and then you actually have to try and keep your balance and stuff like that, where I think they were expecting a lot of action and shooty and stuff like that, and that's not what they got. But the games are still successful. But A24 seems to be the studio that's going to adapt Death Stranding. Now, just before we get into this, I suppose I should really be saying this more often, but do hit the sub button and the like button and the share button, all that stuff. It really does help the channel out. And of course, there are memberships available. So there's all different exclusive videos in there, like reviews of things and breaking down some movies and stuff, and even looking at hot toys. So if you're interested, it's there. You know, no pressure on you. It does obviously and would help the channel, but it's totally up to you. And again, if you could hit the sub button and the like button and all that good stuff, really does help, and it is very much appreciated. Now, let's dive into this, because A24 being the studio doing this is strange, because they don't normally do kind of big budget. Now, that's not to say this will be a big budget movie, but you'd think something like a video game adaptation would kind of lean into the bigger budget end of things. But it starts off saying video game adaptations have ranged from the downright phenomenal to the downright terrible. And that is absolutely the case. Like, I suppose phenomenal, I suppose a lot of people, you could point at the Super Mario Brother movie, made over $1 billion. Now, obviously, that was complete CGI and stuff, but other than that, you know, it was well received and loved. Downright awful, you could look at the likes of Borderlands, because that was just like, what the hell is this movie? It was terrible. And then saying, but A24's upcoming video game movie is going to be downright weird, and fans cannot wait, as well as Alex Garland's Elden Ring movie. I don't ever remember hearing that they were doing an Elden Ring movie, so, and it doesn't say who that's for, so I would assume that would be a pretty big budget movie, and if it doesn't stay very close to that story, I think you're going to annoy fans. And that is the one thing. The headline for this whole story here says, one of the most difficult video games adaptation is getting a loyal movie. So that would indicate that they are going very much into the game. And it continues saying, A24 is producing an adaptation of Hideo Kojimi's, I'm not sure how you pronounce his first name, acclaimed video game Death Stranding. The game, which already plays out like a movie, stars Norman Reedus as Sam Porter Bridges, a courier in a post-apocalyptic world filled with strange creatures from beyond death and rain that ages anything it touches. Like any Kojima's game, Death Stranding is absolutely bizarre, and fans are worried about how faithful A24's adaptation will be Thankfully, the film's producer, Alan Ungar, recently gave us an update that will let fans breathe a sigh of relief. So it sounds like they're going to say, we are absolutely sticking to the game. So, and again, even just hearing that description of the game, you're like, how are they actually going to work this into a movie under a studio like A24? Well, let's see what he says anyway. So during a recent interview with MovieWeb, Alan Unger, I'm probably butchering that name, it's probably not how you pronounce it, but that's how I'm reading it, spoke about A24's Death Stranding movie, which is being directed and written by Michael Sarnowski. And this is what he said: God, I think it's been 3-4 years since we started this journey. Ungar said of the long journey to bringing Kojami's incredibly rich and complex world to life on the big screen. Continuing saying, it's sort of taken on a new direction with some new people that are getting involved. Ungar's mentions of some new people could be a reference to the film's cast, which hasn't yet been revealed, or it could refer to A24 initially wanting Kojami himself to direct the project. However, after Kojami turned down the position, Sarnowski was brought in to helm the film. I am probably absolutely butchering these names, and apologies for that. So the big question on fans' minds is how faithful the movie will be. Death Stranding is a very narrative-focused game with a story that could easily fit on the big screen. However, the scope and scale of the world might be difficult for A24, a studio predominantly known for shying away from 100 million plus blockbusters. However, in that regard, Ungar said the plan is the same now as it was 4 years ago, saying the plan was always to be incredibly loyal to the universe and tell an original story set within that universe. So what that kind of sounds like is they're not going to go with the character of Sam Porter Bridges, the fact that they have been working on this for 4 years. Like, I don't ever remember hearing anything about the studio looking to do a Death Stranding game, whether or not it was A24. None of them. And if they're saying we're looking now at what the cast is going to be and how things have changed, it almost sounds like they were planning to do like just a full-on adaptation of the game, but they're kind of changing that a little bit. So it would still be in the vein of the game, just without the like Norman Reedus or however you pronounce his name, which is strange. Like, how then do you say we're staying absolutely loyal to the game? Because if you're saying that, that would kind of indicate so you're keeping the same cast and stuff, and that doesn't seem to be the case. So it's an interesting one. And again, you even see like this article pointing out like it's weird that it's A24 doing this game. So we'll wait and see what happens with it. I'll keep an eye out and see what kind of updates we get of this. But this is the first time I've heard, anyway, at least that I remember hearing, that a Death Stranding game adaptation for the big screen was happening. So it'll be interesting. It would be very interesting to see how exactly you adapt that type of story into a movie. Like, as it says, it's a narrative strong game where you kind of watch it more than you play it, but obviously you'd be removing the playing parts, but you're still having to introduce this massive world and these weird creatures and rain that ages you and all this type of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. So let's keep an eye out for what's going on with this. And with that, I shall leave it there for this one. So once again, do like, share, subscribe. It really does help and it is very much appreciated. And check out memberships if you're interested. Cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.